On the morning of October 21, 1966, the small Welsh village of Aberfan was forever changed when a catastrophic collapse of a coal waste tip buried a school and several houses, killing 144 people, including 116 children. The Aberfan disaster is one of the most devastating tragedies in British history, leaving a profound impact on the village and the nation as a whole. This narrative explores the events leading up to the disaster, the heartbreaking aftermath, and the lasting legacy of Aberfan in the fight for justice and safety in coal mining communities.
Aberfan, a small village in South Wales, was built around the coal industry, which was the lifeblood of the region. The village lay beneath the Merthyr Vale Colliery, a coal mine operated by the National Coal Board, (NCB). Over the years, waste material from the coal mine, known as spoil, was piled up in large heaps or tips on the hillside above Aberfan. These tips consisted of loose rock and shale, and one of them, Tip 7, was particularly precarious, being placed on top of a natural spring. Concerns about the stability of the tips had been raised by local residents and miners long before the disaster, but these warnings were largely ignored by the NCB. The villagers were uneasy about the massive mounds towering over their homes and school, but they had little power to challenge the decisions made by the NCB, a powerful nationalized industry.
On the morning of October 21, 1966, after several days of heavy rain, the saturated waste material in Tip 7 suddenly gave way. At 9:15 a.m., as the children of Pantlas Junior School had just settled into their classrooms, the tip collapsed, sending 150,000 cubic meters of black sludge and debris rushing down the hillside. The landslide engulfed the school and several nearby houses, burying them under tons of coal waste. The collapse was so sudden and devastating that there was little time for those in its path to escape. The school was hit hardest, with classrooms filled with children and teachers being instantly submerged under the torrent of waste. The sound of the landslide was likened to a jet plane or a low-flying aircraft, followed by an eerie silence as the village realized the scale of the disaster. Rescue efforts began almost immediately, with miners from the local colliery and villagers rushing to the scene to dig through the debris with their hands, shovels, and any tools they could find. However, the sheer weight and volume of the sludge made the task nearly impossible, and it soon became apparent that the chances of finding survivors were slim. The rescue operation continued throughout the day and into the night, but for many, it was a recovery mission rather than a rescue.
The village of Aberfan was plunged into grief as the scale of the tragedy became clear. The final death toll was 144, including 116 children, most of whom were between the ages of 7 and 10. The loss of an entire generation of children was a blow that left the community devastated, with nearly every family in Aberfan affected by the disaster. The immediate response to the disaster saw an outpouring of sympathy and support from across the UK and around the world. Donations and messages of condolence poured in, and the media coverage of the tragedy brought the plight of the village to national attention. However, alongside the expressions of grief and solidarity, there was also growing anger and demands for accountability. The National Coal Board, which was responsible for the management of the coal tips, initially tried to deflect blame, suggesting that the disaster was caused by natural conditions rather than negligence. However, a subsequent public inquiry, led by Lord Justice Edmund Davies, found that the NCB had been grossly negligent in its management of the tips. The inquiry report condemned the NCB's failure to heed warnings about the stability of the tips and its disregard for the safety of the community. The inquiry's findings led to widespread calls for justice and for the NCB to take responsibility for the disaster. However, the NCB's response was slow and inadequate, further exacerbating the pain and anger of the bereaved families. Compensation was eventually paid to the victims' families, but it was seen as insufficient and insultingly low given the scale of the loss. The NCB's reluctance to fully acknowledge its responsibility and its handling of the compensation process left a lasting bitterness in the community.
The Aberfan disaster had a profound impact on the village and the wider world. The tragedy highlighted the dangers of industrial negligence and the need for stronger safety regulations in the coal mining industry. The public inquiry led to changes in how coal waste was managed, and the remaining tips above Aberfan were eventually removed, though only after a protracted battle with the authorities. In the years following the disaster, the village of Aberfan struggled to recover. The emotional scars left by the loss of so many children and the trauma of the event lingered for decades. The disaster also became a symbol of the wider struggles faced by coal mining communities in the UK, many of which suffered from poor working conditions, economic hardship, and a lack of political power. Despite the tragedy, the people of Aberfan demonstrated remarkable resilience and solidarity. The disaster brought the community together in grief, but also in determination to seek justice and to ensure that such a catastrophe could never happen again. The memory of the children and adults who lost their lives in the disaster continues to be honored through memorials and annual commemorations in the village. The legacy of Aberfan is also one of caution and learning. The disaster served as a stark reminder of the need for vigilance, transparency, and accountability in industries where lives are at risk. The lessons learned from Aberfan have influenced safety practices and policies not only in the UK but around the world, helping to prevent similar tragedies in the future.
The Aberfan disaster of 1966 was a heart-wrenching tragedy that left an indelible mark on the village of Aberfan and the nation as a whole. The loss of 144 lives, including 116 children, exposed the devastating consequences of industrial negligence and the need for greater protection of communities. As we remember the events of that fateful day, we are reminded of the importance of listening to the concerns of those at risk, holding those in power accountable, and learning from the past to ensure a safer and more just future. The story of Aberfan is one of profound loss, but also of resilience, solidarity, and the enduring fight for justice.